Every test has at least one true, false, not given type of question or yes, no, not given type of question. You're given a number of statements and you must check the test to see if what they say is the same as in the text. So what's the difference between true, false, not given and yes, no, not given? True, false, not given asks you about a fact. In other words, if the fact in the question is the same as the fact in the text. However, yes, no, not given questions ask you about an opinion. The opinion of the writer. Is this what he believes? Does he believe something different? But whatever kind of question it is, you should answer them in the same way. So how do you go about answering these questions? After skimming the text, you must read the first question or statement in this case and underline keywords. Then go back to the text. Can you find a sentence which says exactly the same or means exactly the same? Does the sentence contradict the question? Does it say something different? Or is there nothing in the passage which has that information? You must decide and then answer true, false, not given or yes, no, not given. So here's a quick summary of what we just mentioned. We read the question. If every word in the question has a synonym in the passage, we say this answer is true. If the passage contradicts the question, in other words, if it says something different, we answer false. We answer not given when the answer could be true or false. We can't really say because it doesn't say it clearly in the passage. Let's look at this simple example together. We have a very short text here. In 2000, I went to work in Abu Dhabi for a year as a teacher. And the example question says, I studied in Abu Dhabi in 2000. This one is obviously false because the text contradicts the question. It says something completely different. Let's look at number 1. I worked in Abu Dhabi for 18 months. Is that the same as the text? In 2000, I went to work in Abu Dhabi for a year. It's obviously different, isn't it? For a year contradicts 18 months, so the answer, of course, is false. Let's look at number 2. I worked in Abu Dhabi at the turn of the century. Is that the same? Does it mean the same? In 2000, turn of the century, I went to work, I worked, so this one is true. Let's look at number 3. I worked in Abu Dhabi in education in 2000. Is that the same? Does it mean the same? In 2000, I went to work as a teacher in education. That's the same, isn't it? It's synonymous, so the answer is true. Let's look at number 4. I learned a lot of Arabic when I lived in Abu Dhabi. Do we know that? Could he have learned a lot of Arabic? He could have. Might he not have learned a lot of Arabic? He might not have. We don't know, do we? Because the answer doesn't say. So the answer is not given. Look at number 5. I worked as a waiter in Abu Dhabi in 2000. The text says I went to work as a teacher. So this one contradicts the text, so the answer is false. Another thing to look out for is for limiting, qualifying, comparatives, and cause and consequence in the questions. Because if the questions contains one of these, the text must also contain them in order to say this is true. So limiting words are words such as little, only, no, not less. Qualifying words are words such as significantly, major, minor, always, never, often, all. Sometimes sentences contain comparatives. In other words, two items are mentioned and they might say, for example, A is less than B, or X is more than Z, or as tall as big as, for example. So in order to say true, they must compare the same two things in the same order. There might also be sentences with cause and consequence. Let's look at these in more detail. Look at this example. The question says, the literacy rate in less developed nations is considerably higher than all European countries. We can see clearly that this sentence contains a qualifying word, considerably higher. Let's look at the text. In the United Kingdom, and indeed in some other European countries, the literacy rate has fallen to below that of so-called developed countries. Can we find a synonym for considerably in the text? We cannot, can we? So could the literacy rate be considerably higher in developed countries, in less developed countries? Well, it could be. Could it be a little higher or a lot higher? It could be any of these. We cannot be sure. So the answer is not given. Look at these sentences. Let's look at how they contain comparisons, limiting words, and qualifying words. Let's look at number 1. Brunel was less important than the other construction engineers during the Industrial Revolution. We've highlighted here less important than because this one is a comparison. Look at number 2. Brunel was less involved, another comparison. Number 3. Brunel worked only on shipping. So this one has a limiting word. So we're going to look out for these when we do the complete text. Look at number 4. Brunel's work was largely ignored by his colleagues. Another limiting word. All projects Brunel contributed to are still used today. All is another qualifying word. Brunel became an apprentice with his father at the same age as other engineers. So this is comparing his age with other engineers. Number 7, the Thames Tunnel project was more difficult than other previous construction venture. So this one contains a comparison. Let's look at some answers together. Brunel was less important than the other construction engineers in Britain during the Industrial Revolution. So this one here contains a comparison. Brunel was less important than the other constructioneers in Britain during the Industrial Revolution. So in order to say true, we must find the same two things being compared. Let's look at this. The most important of the engineers was Brunel, whose work in shipping and construction both challenged and motivated his colleagues. Now this one clearly contradicts the question, doesn't it? Because it doesn't say he was less important, he was the most important. So the answer is false. Let's look at number 2. Some projects Brunel contributed to are still used today. So our limiting words here, some projects still used today. Let's look at the text. He was the driving force behind a number of hugely ambitious projects, some of which resulted in works which are still in use today. So this one is true because we can find synonyms for all the words in the question. So let's do some more questions together. Let's look at number 2 now. Brunel was less involved in railway construction than other engineering fields. So here we have a comparison. It's comparing Brunel's involvement in railway construction with other engineering fields. Let's go to the passage and look for our synonyms for the keywords. He was less involved in railway construction. Here we are here. The most important of these was Brunel, whose work in shipping, bridge building and railway construction both challenged and motivated his colleagues. Does it compare his involvement in railway construction with other engineering fields? It doesn't, does it? Could he have been less involved in railway construction? He could have. He could have been more involved. We don't know. It doesn't say. So the answer is not given. Let's look at number 3. Brunel worked only on shipping, bridge building and railway construction. So using our keywords from here, we go to the sentence again, which talks about, which mentions the same words. The most important of these was Brunel, whose work in shipping, bridge building and railway construction, to name just 3 fields, both challenged and motivated his colleagues. So did he work only on shipping? Well, here it says to name just 3 fields. In other words, there were more fields than that. So the answer is false. Let's look at number 4. Brunel's work was largely ignored by his colleagues. Largely is a qualifying word. In other words, his work was to a large extent ignored by his colleagues. Let's see what the passage says. Down here it mentions his colleagues, and it says his work in shipping, bridge building and railway constructions both challenged and motivated his colleagues. So does that mean that it was ignored? No, it means the opposite, doesn't it? So the answer is false. So look at number 5. All projects Brunel contributed to are still used today. Let's have a look. He was the driving force behind a number of hugely ambitious projects, some of which resulted in works which are still in use today. So it's not all his projects which are still in use today. It says here some of which, so the answer is false. For questions 6 and 7, have a look at the full text on the next page. And you can find the whole text and the answers in the ebook.